Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 179 with Derek LaMontagne. This is a continuation of a conversation that we had, a bonus episode that released of me moderating a panel at recent Times Higher Education event, focusing on graduate student well-being. So this focuses in on a particular issue happening at University of Florida that is indicative of kind of this ongoing trend nationwide of graduate students advocating for their needs. This one focusing in particular on housing. So I really appreciate the work that Derek is doing on this issue and his willingness to come on to talk about it. There are ways to connect and help out their efforts in the description for this episode. So appreciate folks lending their support there. And you may notice that there have been some adjustments and changes as the podcast has transitioned to its new home in the Enrollify podcast network. We appreciate your understanding as we kind of manage everything. You will find all the episodes starting to be released on the Enrollify website. Obviously, you can still listen to it in all your favorite podcast players, and we'll start to have some video clips and stuff coming out soon as well as just some greater support and other improvements for the show as time goes on. So really excited for the future, and you can still look forward to new episodes coming out consistently here in the feed. So with that, this is bonus episode number 179 with Derek LaMontagne. A little while ago, I moderated a session centering more generally on graduate student well-being, the issues that they face at institutions. And we've only continued to see nationwide here in the United States more and more strikes by graduate students and just them asking for kind of basic needs and respect. And I felt as though it'd be a really great opportunity to kind of continue the conversation, have somebody who's working kind of on the front lines of this issue from their institution. So as a graduate student, so I'm really glad to have that perspective in this conversation today. But we'll still start as we always do. Derek, if you want to introduce yourself and give a brief overview of your professional background and how you get to be where you are today.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Dustin. My name is Derek LaMontagne. I am a graduate student in chemistry at the University of Florida. I am also the president of a group called Mayor's Council, which represents the students living in graduate and family housing at the University of Florida. And yeah, I have noticed a lot of problems with housing in our area, but also other issues affecting graduate students. But I've taken the lead because what our university here is trying to do, as many others have done in the past, is remove some graduate housing, which is near and dear to a lot of people who do live here and also affects future graduate students. So I'm hoping to change that, and we're working hard to protect this graduate housing, which is really a wonderful place to live. They're really nice, spacious apartments, and they're what families want. They're open space, they're on campus, and they're affordable. And that's what's important, is having an affordable place for students, because we don't make very much money as graduate students, as I'm sure you're aware. But in general, this one little perk we have is on the verge of going away, and we're really trying to get people to listen, not just at other universities and stuff, but really to have a voice in campus decisions. So that's the goal.
Right. Well, and yeah, I mean, I've worked with graduate students for years and a few of my prior positions. And, while it was in the online space, just knowing, a lot of times these are adult learners who are navigating work and life and family and school all at the same time. So I feel like they honestly have enough to worry about versus, stuff like this and what's happening. And I think some people have seen what's happening at Temple University right now as the recording of this episode. So, it really is unfortunate because I think, institutions have seen for the past several years graduate students as, a sort of ripe ground for the growth of their university, but really kind of taking it for granted. And certainly the conversation that I had, Tiffany Miller introduced us, for the panel that I had moderated, there's just a number of issues and policies that I think are just long overdue for remedying, and just fundamental sort of like respect and, like you said, sort of a seat at the table, having a voice be heard, and having institutional leadership kind of take action on, making sure that they can maintain healthy environments for these graduate students, which they've often gone to great lengths to recruit because of potential shortfalls or just the kind of increased competitiveness for undergraduate students. So it's an interesting sort of context that we find ourselves in. But if you want to go into a little bit more detail, kind of the background of housing at University of Florida and sort of this current issue, because I think you gave a good summary, but if you want to kind of dig in to some of the details here so we can kind of get more of the context.
In general, we have 5 villages for on-campus graduate student and family housing. Those have been around for at least 50 years, most of them. And the university is somewhat arguing that, oh, they've reached the end of their lifespan, but really that's not the case. I still live in them, and everyone else who has said they are fine if we just make the investment. So 5 of these villages, hold well over 1,000 people. My village holds about 348. It's called McGuire Village in UVS. It's been around for over 50 years. But besides just being on campus, it's affordable, it's safe, and there's a lot of amenities. There's playgrounds for kids when there's families. We have pool, all these wonderful things, and there's a lot of large trees. There's historic things here that really make it a community. And what's most important, though, is that the students who live here, the grad students who actually choose to live in on-campus housing at UF, they're over 70% international students. And that's an important statistic because really it's what attracts those students to UF. It's one of the only reasons some of them maybe can attend, because I've heard at other universities that if this graduate housing is not available, that they either have to delay their start date or they just have to choose somewhere else, because if you're coming from far away, and this isn't just international, but I know people from who came from California or Oregon or somewhere who had to come here. They don't know anything about the local places to live. They don't really know anything about safety, and for sure, just to have an option available attracts those students and really allows them to pursue their degree, and really does help the university. So I'm hoping that other universities see this as well as ours, that if you have a safe space that's on campus, it really allows the graduate students to live where they work and where they teach. Of course, we're teaching all the undergrads in a lot of the classes. And without that option, to just say basically, as we're being told now, that, oh, you guys can just find off-campus housing as anyone else does in these high rises that aren't really family friendly, that are literally going to raise our rent by 50%. So well over 1,000, whereas now on campus we're somewhere around the $700 range, which is very reasonable. But it's a deeply flawed decision in our opinion, that UF would do this, because it's killing the golden goose. Like we're going to have less talented, or we're not going to attract the same kind of talent to UF. And these places are wonderful by themselves. As I mentioned earlier, they're a community, and they allow these different cultures and different religions and people of different backgrounds to really to live together safely and in harmony, in a way that I don't want to sound too idealistic here, but like it is like a little model UN we have going, where it's people from every different country, even countries that are literally at war today, can live side by side as neighbors and come to community gatherings and talk about things. That I really think these spaces need to be amplified, not taken away, especially for something just because they don't want to pay a little bit of money to fix a roof here or there, which is very sad. And I think in the heart of what our university wants, like we talk about having core values. It's actually been promoted recently at our university. I'm sure other places have similar things that they say our university stands for, including inclusion, community, excellence, things like that. And basically, all of those things are being harmed by this decision. We are losing a community. We're losing our stewardship of the environment. That's one of them, by just clearing 27 acres of land to get rid of this community here. That's going to remove basically 40% of the graduate housing, equaling 348 apartments. So I'm trying to find examples elsewhere of that number of housing units being lost in one fell swoop, and it's 44 buildings all at once. Later this year is the plan, and they've been keeping them artificially unoccupied as people have started to move out for the last couple of years. So they're not totally full now, and that's another problem too, because even if you had to close them, there's no reason why you couldn't keep people in them now. But I've also made the point that right now there's a few hundred units empty that are in this village now, because they're anticipating closing them. And those few hundred units could have housed like hurricane victims. In our state here, we've had there's many people living in hotels. And I was just thinking, this is a state resource. Why can't we do that? And actually, as a little aside, I know I'm going a little too far ahead, during the COVID times, the undergrad dorms, they actually quarantined some of those people in our village as this, resource that was sort of on the outskirts of campus, but still on campus, that let people live in this, not cramped dormitories in the high rises, but actually have them spread out. And this resource really saved lives. So I don't want to over exaggerate that, but our community and these buildings are really worth it. Again, they're called McGuire Village and UVS. And I really think if anyone has ever seen them or been here, it's really a wonderful place, as a lot of UF campus is, but it's just going to be a hole in the ground in just a few months if we can't change anything.
You've almost certainly heard of Slate, one of the most powerful admission CRMs on the market. And you may have also heard of HubSpot, a dynamic and robust marketing CRM that is second to none when it comes to marketing and full funnel reporting. But have you heard of HubSlate? HubSlate is a two-way data sync between HubSpot and Slate that ensures consistency of data and information for prospective, current, and former students. Gone are the days of list uploads, checking multiple platforms for the most up-to-date information, or having to pull multiple reports in order to get a sense of your entire enrollment funnel. With HubSlate, you'll be able to work smarter, more efficiently, and without all of the stress that comes with managing contact records. It's 2023. It's about time that you let your systems work for you. If you want to learn more about HubSlate or see a demo, visit enrollify.org/HubSlate. That's enrollify.org/HubSlate, and you'll instantly qualify for 20% off the onboarding fee. Now, on to the show. Well, I appreciate you sharing, obviously, your passion, but also kind of like getting our arms around, what is going to be lost, both sort of just objectively, the kind of the numbers and all that, but also sort of that, honestly, the emotional piece. And like you said, some of the things that institutions kind of aspire towards, would be impacted, as well as, other kind of tangible pieces around, like you said, these are these graduate students are helping to teach classes. They're, working on campus in various capacities. And, if they don't have affordable, accessible, reliable housing, then, there's going to be a huge impact to their enrollment. So like there's kind of a confluence of things too, from my perspective, where it's like, okay, like, obviously where's the worst case scenario? Like if they decide to tear it down, then I'm like, okay, then you've got to pay these graduate students more, because like you said, it's like, they're not going to study here if they can't afford to live somewhere. And, if hopefully, these buildings remain standing, then it's like, okay, then you maintain this, resource of, like you said, just, housing capacity. They're still getting the tuition revenue and all the money. These are students who are paying to go to this institution, and then staff members who are working. So I'm curious, I guess, how much intentionality they may have put into how they would address, a shortfall of, any number of students who were living there who would no longer be enrolled if they didn't have that housing available to them. So that's definitely what I wanted to kind of explore next, is kind of that impact of the removal of this housing. Like, what would that be? And I think you've detailed a good portion of that, but I'm not sure if there's anything else on your mind in terms of the impact. I mean, and clearly, I mean, for what you're saying, there's already an impact, because they're sort of undermining kind of the true success of like having this community at full capacity, and the opportunity to have more graduate students be studying there because they have like a affordable place to live. But yeah, anything else to add? Anything else coming to mind in terms of the impact that the removal of this housing would have?
Yes, there is immediate impact, and then there will be a long-term impact, of course. So the immediate impact is we're actually not helping students who want to move in today. Our wait list is, at last check, over 800 people to live in on-campus graduate housing. That's graduate students. And we have, I think over last check, 10 or 15,000 grad students. So there's a lot of grad students at UF. We have the most grad students at any university in Florida, I believe. And it's a big university, of course, so there's a lot of demand. So in Gainesville in general, which is the city where we are in Florida, we have a large undergrad demand of housing, plus everyone else who lives in the city. So the housing rates have really gone up exponentially in the last few years. But here, those 800 people are being negatively affected now because they want to move in. As I mentioned earlier, we have a couple hundred of these units are empty now. They could move many of them in today and just say, like, we're not going to tear down the ones that are bad. And my point I had alluded to earlier was that most of these are fine. There are 44 buildings here. They maybe found a few problems in one or two of them, which is normal. For Florida, we've had like some of our most expensive buildings on campus and stadiums and stuff. They regularly go through millions, if not tens of millions of dollars of renovation just to maintain. They get leaks just like everywhere else, but we're doing actually pretty well considering these are, these were built sturdy when they were built. But those 800 students are going to be negatively affected, and people like me, we're being basically told we have to move or we're going to be evicted this year, even if we only have like a year left. Like, or some people I know are like in the process of writing their dissertation. They're basically being told you have to move this semester. And then, even if they say just have a few months left, can I stay? And they're like, no, we're, keeping you out. So these people now on campus, these students are feeling this animosity from the university, not really accommodating us, although they say, well, we're going to talk to you or work with you. But when we say, okay, the best way to do that is just delay the closure, or, let's come to the table, because that never happened. Actually, one of the reasons this decision took place isn't because it was ever really a good idea or ever because it was in the sunshine. It's because it was sort of nestled into this larger bill that the university by state law had to pass every 5 years. It's called a campus master plan. And I'm sure many universities have this in general, but what ours required back in 2020, this was decided. It basically had some firm come in and sort of say, we're going to make campus more walkable and, maybe improve some rec fields and parking and stuff. And all those are, good in general, but they completely ignored graduate students and basically saw our housing area on the map and just said, that's not an asset. That's like a liability because we could put rec fields or parking there or something like that. That's literally what they're planning to put here is a practice soccer field and just a parking lot. They've even just said, we don't even really need them. We just don't want to just keep these around because they're not any good or in terms of use to the university. But that obviously is not true because we provide the teaching resources and the crux of the research at the university, getting grants and the best output on papers and everything. We help the university run. So we obviously serve a purpose that was sort of ignored in that we need this resource. And so we were the last domino to fall on this campus master plan that back in 2020, again, they're like, okay, we're going to move this field there and that field taking a parking lot there. And then just, there was never a replacement for us. It was just use our space, didn't put us somewhere else. They're not building new graduate housing anywhere. That's still not in the plan, like 3 years later. And we've been asking, like, look, if you're saying these buildings aren't, modern enough or whatever, although we love living in them. Again, they're beautiful brick and lots of trees around here. I prefer the older style and just, we're not asking for fancy, gold sinks and everything. We just need standard things like, internet, running water, and, we're close to campus. It couldn't ask for more. But yeah, this master plan just really threw us under the bus because there's no plan for replacement. At the moment, they're still scrambling with just like a couple months left before they actually close it. And they're trying to say, maybe we could acquire some off-campus place and just call it grad housing or something, which is not at all what we want. And we've been adamantly opposed to this, me and the other organizations, but we were never given a seat at the table. And really even the people who ultimately decided this, again, I have no problem with the people who decided because they were just kind of given bad information or never really given an opportunity to look at the issue by itself. So our graduate housing, part of this other plan, you can think of it like a bill passed in Congress. Oh, you got to pass the defense budget or whatever, like you have to pass, or a spending bill that like, this is one of those little things that was just deep in there in the like hundreds of pages in that just said, we're going to rezone this place. And that decision we've been trying to bring to light and say, let's talk about this. It was never given its time in the sun, essentially. And we're still asking, I'm strongly asking it to be revisited. And just so you know, we have had some success so far. The student government, which is not just grad students, it's undergrads, has passed a resolution, which they actually passed 2 years ago, saying we, all 50 plus thousand students, undergrads and grad students, are opposed to this decision. It passed unanimously in our student government. UF administrators just kind of ignored that. You could say, well, maybe it was like COVID times or whatever. I don't know. In 2020, 2021, that they had their reasons. There's also been a lot of things going on at UF, which I don't need to tell you about, but a lot of other questions about, free speech and, teacher tenure and other kind of, we have a new president now at our university, and there's lots of things that people had on the front of their mind, and we've just been waiting our turn. I'm trying to get it before as many people as I can. So I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity today to speak to anyone, and definitely if we can get some public pressure and even some outrage, that UF might change its decision, because they have in the past. There is a way to amend this master plan. It's not set in stone. It's just like a guideline. And obviously, until these are torn down, that we can still fight to save them. But even if they argue and say we have to tear them down, we can easily invest more in and get more housing. For instance, the UF is building a new undergrad dorm that is going to cost over $200 million. And they aren't going to pay I think they estimated something like 20 to 30 million to fix all 44 of our buildings to their highest standard that they want, which again, I don't think it's anywhere near that amount. I think just a couple million would fix all of these to whatever standard they want. But they're spending 200 million on that and not willing to spend less than 10% on us as grad students. And it's just really, the juxtaposition of priorities is really hard to take. But I think you see the picture and you see that what is the purpose, I guess, of the university? What does the leadership want? They want undergrads to be happy, as I do too. I don't want them to not be happy, but they agree that we got to balance it, equally, that grad students have what they need to do a good job and for just really the whole community to thrive here at the university.
Yeah, it is hard to me to understand that idea where it seems as though they believe that, something must come at the cost of something else. Like it's a very limited pie. It's like it's an institution with, it's a public institution with a lot of resources and, state level support and everything that there's not another way, it seems as though well, this is our only option, or they're just for me kind of thinking, in kind of a cheesy way where it's just I don't think you're using your imagination. I don't think you're being kind of creative here. I think there's very much other solutions, and and I'm sure people might kind of uh, maybe kind of chastise me for this, but is truly a parking lot and a practice soccer field as important as a substantial resource of affordable housing for graduates? It doesn't even seem like it's an equal thing. You could understand if it's oh, we're replacing that with the same thing. It's just a one for one, we're updating it, and it's just going to make more sense to kind of go right down to the foundation and start over again. Appreciate kind of, again, just sort of the really firsthand look and the context and kind of understanding sort of how this has all come to be. And I think like I said, this is a nationwide trend. I think that's happening, kind of a movement that seems as though it's been kind of this, quiet, simmering thing that is really starting to kind of boil over. And again, it's long overdue for graduate students, I think, to get the, the respect and the dignity that they deserve and the support from their institution. So, I'm sure there's people listening to this that have been seeing those headlines and everything. So just kind of speaking generally, what do you think other higher ed leaders should be taking away from this issue? Because like you said, there's just a lot of sort of dynamics around, how things were communicated, the input and feedback that they're getting from students, and whether they're actually taking heed of that and taking action on it and all those sort of things. So just advice that you would give generally to other higher ed leaders who are thinking about kind of, dealing with an issue like this.
Sure. I would say just, of course, the people who are affected, the stakeholders, need to have a seat at the table. Maybe it's intentional, or maybe it's just through a long process here of various entities, because we're pretty big at this university, and that makes it more difficult. But we have many different sort of sub-representations of even graduate students. So, for instance, we have a union. We also have a graduate student council. we also have my entity, which represents just the students living in graduate students. And of course, like our law school has a grad student group, our veterinary school has a, grad student group, and every, department has its own. And then there's even, cultural ones. So there's a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of representation that's sort of dispersed and spread thin that makes it difficult to have like one person speak for, who wants to change this. But in this case, they really didn't even try and ask anybody of any of those clubs. And transparency always helps, of course. But also, I'd say use your experts, use the people who know this, because I've talked to not just like the students, grad students, but also like professors who have commented on this. They actually study here at this university. We have experts in like affordable housing. We have experts in, green buildings. We have experts in, planning and so forth. But they aren't really being listened to. And this is not just for this issue, but really just for anything at all. We've had some issues with landscaping here and stuff where they just sort of arbitrarily cut down historic trees, and the forestry department's like, what the heck's going on? Like, why did you guys do this? We had our school accidentally cut down a tree that went into space and was our like moon tree, but the grounds crew just like, it's in the way kind of thing. And that was very depressing that this communication just isn't existing on an institutional level. So the transparency, if we just had this opportunity, which for this case, there was supposed to be this, like originally there was supposed to be like a 90-day comment window, and there was supposed to be chance for public comment. But basically during 2020, when our school shut down, they canceled all of that, and they never have made up for it at all, which is very upsetting. They put everything on Zoom, and not only that, but then the one Zoom meeting where they actually said, okay, this is kind of our public hearing, they didn't let anyone else talk. It was just the presenter from UF. So that was upsetting. But your question was about greater, what can other universities do? Well, some universities have actually taken some action, and I would just say that it has to do with not just focusing on undergrads. So part of it is actually this calling that I think is kind of wrong or misguided, that universities are focusing, and ours specifically, on the undergraduate ranking that comes out by U.S. News and World Report that is promoted like super widely here. And it's really cringeworthy, honestly, that we're saying, we're now a top 5 public university. That's UF. Since my time here, has jumped up a few spots in this ranking, if this matters to you. But of course, that ranking that they so often cite, and that they're putting all their resources in, including building the new undergrad dorms and putting a new undergrad, rec space in our spot, is to help that ranking. Literally, my home, our grad affordable housing, is seen as a liability to improving the ranking, which is just absurd. But it literally is in the numbers on how they calculate it, which is flawed. So the U.S. News and World Report is deeply flawed, and I'm hoping more universities pull out of it. And some have. You might have heard this, and not just for that reason alone, but other places like I think just last year, Yale Law School pulled out of the U.S. News and World Report ranking because they basically don't value, social justice issues, just like making money or whatever their complaint was about that. And, Harvard, and Princeton have also commented, their presidents in the past have said this is just a wacky obsession. And those are like, the top of the list. So if they're saying we should not focus on this, then schools like ours, who are, looking to be seen worldwide and attract that, need to remember what is important, what does actually make us have the better reputation worldwide. And that is having things that attract people here. And a lot of those people are the grad students, but also the idea of like respect. If this, gets out, I really also hope that those other universities do have a say in how UF is viewed. If you guys at other universities view us and just say like, oh, well, they're building a new AI institute, or like they built a new stadium, like whatever, let's put them at the highest ranking, instead of just saying, hey, they're really not being transparent. They're treating their grad students bad. They are literally, doing stuff against free speech and other things that are harming, real people and causing this misery and not paying us well either. Like, I hope those kind of get through. And, I guess it was, we had a visitor from NYU, a professor named Andrew Ross, who came last year or two ago, and I asked him, I said, you study like housing, and what can I do to save my housing? And he said, basically for, public institutions, you have to shame them. You have to shame them into doing the right thing. And I guess I've been trying to do that ever since. So yeah, that's getting the information out there is the first step.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of, humorous, I guess, just thinking like kind of that bluntly, but it's like, I mean, that kind of is like the thing where it's like shining a light on when, they're not doing the things that they're supposed to, or they're doing them just as kind of like to check off a box or something, where there are these policies and procedures around, any public institution, and how they should be really being mindful of the community and the stakeholders, whether that is, local government or a University of Florida, like they need to be uh just really cognizant of almost like, and like deferential or sort of humble, to the sense of like, we are here to serve our students. Like we want to support them to have, meaningful and like meaningful experiences and positive outcomes and all that. And yeah, it's pretty transparent when you're seeing them taking actions that are very, self-serving of themselves and aspiring towards, I agree, these kind of faulty rankings that really don't measure things that are creating those positive experiences for students. Like it is biased towards undergrads for the most part, and the things that it does measure aren't really the cornerstones, I think, of a really positive student experience. So I think, obviously you're doing the work to try to, spread this message and all that. So if folks are listening and they want to help out somehow, what are ways that they could do that?
Well, anyone can, of course, sign our petition. I do have a website, saveufgradhousing.com, but also really just to help not focus so much on that ranking push that is big too. So whenever you hear, someone say like, oh, we're improving in that ranking, say like, well, what about like the sustainability ranking list? Like, how come we're like 200 something on that or something, or these other lists on social justice and things like that. That there's not one ranking list. So to really push back on that and never really accept that as truth, or at least as something to be strived for. But also, yeah, we can do other things too, of course. Honestly, I'm trying to find a way to reset how students kind of get representation too. So to really just have these bodies at universities that are representative of what they're supposed to do. And for instance, too, like in our city and county, the way it's set up, we're basically we have no say. The city and county in Gainesville, at least, they don't have any say on what happens at UF. And I think many states have similar policies such that students, and not just grad students, are basically like wards of the state, I believe it was called at one point. Like you are not a true citizen because you don't get to vote for people who like directly impact you. As you know, like our university is run by boards that are appointed by like other elected people. And if I try to complain to my city and county that they don't actually have any power, so what's the point of my voting? I was like, well, then democracy is failing essentially students on campus, and especially grad students. So really we have to take universities as little government entities and have that transparency we would demand of our cities and counties and states, and not just say, oh, well, they're doing something. So these people who live there are literally like, at the mercy of these unelected people, including in our case, the housing department, basically, who puts these arbitrary standards on us. And we say like, how do we change them? They're like, you can't. And that just doesn't sit well with me. So to demand that all students get a say in the decisions happening to them, especially if they live on campus. This is kind of not known that this is a problem. But yeah, again, it's different everywhere. Every state's different. I know when I was an undergrad, I was not allowed to vote in local elections. I was in a school in Virginia. But here they allow students to vote in local elections, but then the locals are mad because that changes the dynamics here, but then also they don't have power. What happens at UF? So it's really all these questions about what does it mean to kind of rule a university? Who's really in charge? Is it the people of the state of Florida? Is it that, whoever votes anywhere out throughout our state, even someone down in Miami or something, or all the way up in Tallahassee, if they vote for, things happening on the state level, like the governor or something, is that really the only way that I can have any say in what happens in my backyard, which is campus, is my vote for governor or something like, and that's affected by everyone else. So everyone else is kind of ruling over us. But that was kind of a long way of saying that there's a lot that needs to change, but representation, transparency, and just caring about our community and the people who are grad students. I'd say, please, thank a grad student, I guess, if you are an undergrad or know someone who is struggling in that profession. But yeah, the housing, we should preserve it. We should respect these places more, and we should honor them. And I know also at like my undergrad place, like they knocked down one dorm like last year. It wasn't a grad student dorm, and it was sad. And they actually had like an alumni event. They invited everyone there to say say their farewells basically to one building. And here we're about to lose 44 buildings with no fanfare at all. And these have represented housing for grad students for over 50 years. And with 500 people or more living in them for 50 years, that's 25,000 years of history that is like going to be lost as these people's homes. And just the impact that's going to have not just on our university, but really on society too, as these people won't be able to in the future, have the same impact. We've had people who've lived here who've gone on to, not just start businesses, but also help solve the climate crisis and compete for like the Carbon X Prize and all these other things that people who've lived here in this village account for their grad housing and the stability that provides and the just peace of mind that provides as the start of their career and the success that they have later. So we won't know all the impacts in the future until down the road when things are just going to be worse if society misses out on this chance to come together and provide a better place for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you sharing all that you did and for doing this work, and I wish you and your colleagues the best of luck in saving this housing, and obviously have ways to help out that you've shared in the show notes and everything. But again, I think this is just indicative of certainly a larger trend in higher ed right now, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this sort of example of it with you here today.
Well, thank you so much for the chance, and I think we can succeed, or at least get something better than what the plan is now. So thank you for the time, and I guess we'll see.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. Our shows feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Mickey Baines, Jeremy Tiers, Jaime Hunt, Corinne Myers, Jamie Gleason, and many, many more. You can learn more about the Enrollify Podcast Network at podcasts.enrollify.org. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea. Find yours at podcasts.enrollify.org.